Thank you so much, Eric, and thank you for having me here today. Hello to my friends in New Jersey. I was telling Eric earlier, I'm actually based in Philadelphia, so I'm very close by. Would love to come see some of you in New Jersey sometime. Welcome to Digital Safety in Adult Foundational Education. Today, we will explore ways to ensure that we're engaging in secure and ethical practices that treat our adult education programs and participant data with the value they deserve. I really appreciate you joining me here today. My name is Eliana. I'm a professional development specialist at World Education focused on digital literacy. I support a number of projects in that role, including SABASE, the Massachusetts Adult Basic Education Professional Development System, the IDEAL Consortium, the Boston Digital Literacy Initiative, the American Library Association's Libraries as Literacy Centers program, and more. But what we are discussing today is the result of my own independent learning and research on digital safety, technoethics, and public interest technology. It also draws on my 10 years of experience in the adult ESOL classroom, where I worked not only in publicly funded adult education, but also in a variety of community learning programs and refugee resettlement agencies, with a particular focus on digital learning with language learners at all literacy levels. So through this and my community organizing experience, I grew focused on how adult learners so frequently get left out of conversations on data rights and privacy, despite their data being extremely valuable and thus heavily targeted by a myriad of groups. I also want to shout out my colleague, Lucy Burris, who is in the chat supporting me today. I think she's already sent a note around to you guys. As I speak, she'll be sending links to some of the things I referenced. And I've also shared my slides with Eric. So if you'd like to see them, you're welcome to reach out to him, or you can reach out to me directly. My email is on the screen here. Lucy shared this, but today's session is being recorded. So please take note of that. Obviously, digital safety and security is a sensitive topic, especially right now. So I'll be happy to answer your questions later off the recording if there's something you want to hold until later on. Or, if you want to ask it now, just be mindful of how you phrase it. I'm happy to tread through those waters together. So, I'm about to ask you a question, keeping in mind that everything is being recorded today. I'd love to read in the chat what you do feel comfortable sharing. My question is, what digital information do adult foundational education programs need to protect? You don't need to answer about your program if you don't want to. You can think more generally about what might come up for you. And I'll give you a moment to think about it. That question has also been pasted in the chat for you. Students discussing status from Eric. Yes, absolutely. I'm also going to try going forward to not read people's names. But yes, absolutely. Students discussing status should very much be protected. What else is on your mind? Personal data. Mm-hmm. And then somebody else shared social numbers, addresses, personal details. You might call that PII or personally identifiable information. If you're looking through privacy policies or articles about cybersecurity, you might see that information referred to as PII. That's great. Anything else? There are also things we might not think of, right? Beyond PII. Criminal backgrounds. That's a really important one. Absolutely. Good point. I'll give you one more minute. Physical locations. Yeah. Geographic information, whether that's their personal address or places that they're going, businesses that they're patronizing. If you have access to that information, you want to protect it. All right. Please feel free to continue dropping work status. There you go. That's a great one. Yes. Learners' work statuses is something you'd want to keep very close. Very, very close. All right. We'll keep going for now, but thank you so much for sharing all of that. We're going to talk about a lot of those things today. Now, these two questions that are on the screen, I simply want you to bear in mind throughout the presentation, which are what is one thing you can change now, and what is something you want to learn more about? We will return to these questions at the end. Also, yes, medical information. I see somebody just shared that. Absolutely. Okay, let's jump into it and let's get clear on the issues. What exactly is the problem that we're facing? I like to start with vocabulary. That's my ESOL background. So let's define our term. First, privacy. Privacy is the assurance that your data is only seen by the parties you intend to view it. For example, if you use WhatsApp, that is an end-to-end encrypted service. So that means that they provide you with privacy by keeping your message visible only to yourself and to the recipient. And in today's society, privacy is power. So naturally, we want to keep the power in our hands. Next term is security. Security is the ability to trust the applications that you use and that the parties involved are who they say they are, and to keep those applications safe. So, for example, in the context of browsing the web, security can be provided by the HTTPS certificate, because that proves that you are talking directly to the website you're visiting, and it keeps attackers on your network from reading or modifying the data that is sent to and from the website. Security and privacy are very connected, and sometimes you can have stronger privacy or stronger security. But we can talk more about that if you're ever curious. For now, it's okay if you're using them interchangeably as long as you know that they're important and they have power in our society. Finally, let's talk about surveillance. Surveillance is when agencies, organizations, websites, and services work together to track your activities. Some of you may associate this with the government, which absolutely makes sense. But there are also corporations that play a large role in the surveillance apparatus that we are confronted with today. So, what applies to you? My discussion today will vary in relevance based on your already existing privacy obligations. So, if you receive education funding from the federal or state government, you already have to adhere to the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA. I'm also sure many of you may be funded through the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WIOA. You may be obligated to other laws too, like HIPAA if your organization also provides health services, COPPA if your organization also serves young students, the IDEA for organizations that are supporting the disabled community, or the Violence Against Women Act if you're providing legal support to survivors of domestic violence. And there are also state laws, local laws, and more that I can't name here. So the point is that everyone's considerations will be different. I'm not a lawyer, and you should consult an expert if your program is not currently clear on what digital safety measures you are legally required to take at your program. Most efforts that are focused on student privacy focus on K-12 learners, but adult education often involves learners with high stakes privacy needs, including refugees and immigrants, and folks who are systems impacted, who have a criminal record. In adult foundational education, data privacy and protection is a matter of physical and legal safety. So let's review some digital hygiene. These are the day-to-day issues that folks working in digital safety are thinking about, and many of you may already be discussing with your colleagues or your learners. First, scams. This includes things like fraudulent emails, texts, or calls that are designed to play on someone's fear or sympathy, thereby tricking them into sharing sensitive information. Second is targeting vulnerable credentials. This includes having weak or reused passwords or using unsecured public Wi-Fi. And finally, your digital footprint. This includes data brokerage companies that collect data through advertising and location tracking and sell it to third parties, as well as social media. But let's shift to what is happening right now that has changed and how it directly impacts adult foundational education students, particularly immigrants and refugees. First, biometric surveillance. That encompasses a collection of methods for tracking individuals using physical or biological characteristics. Facial recognition is a biometric technology that uses a face or the image of a face to identify or verify the identity of an individual in photos, videos, or in real time. Internal government documents procured by the Washington Post in late 2025 reveal huge investments in this technology by immigration enforcement agencies. Many journalists have been covering the use of apps that allow federal agents to scan any face in public and then draw on a DHS database with 200 million images. And that includes information not just from DHS, but also from the FBI and the State Department to determine somebody's immigration status. The second issue is personal networks and the scraped public data that you can get from different platforms in our networks. This data can be stitched together to infer identity, location, status, beliefs, networks, even if no one website alone reveals that information. Immigration enforcement contracts with companies that do exactly this. They scrape data from that's publicly available on hundreds of websites, including popular language learning and job search sites, and then they triangulate that data. So we don't know exactly how these tools are being used right now. We only know that they have been purchased and that they are likely in use to some extent. But this means theoretically, a user learning English or regional language on a popular language learning app that is able to have its data scraped could be triangulated with job history or job search history on a popular job search site. And then if that data suggests that they moved or they're working in an industry with high rates of undocumented labor, they can be flagged for further investigation. Earlier, I also talked about how end-to-end encrypted messages are only supposed to be seen by the people who have sent and received them. But it's important to remember that no online communication is 100% secure. There have been recent reports from sites like TechCrunch that ICE has renewed contracts with organizations with spyware that's able to harvest messages from different encrypted chat apps, even the ones that you might think are the most secure, without the user ever knowing. ICE has also renewed contracts with companies that help them unlock phones and take images of all the data on the phone. So that includes apps, location history, photos, notes, call records, text messages, even encrypted ones. Ooh! Whenever I review all of this stuff, I really need to take a deep breath because we live in scary times. You could take it with me. I'm often scared anyway. But these questions can lead us to solutions. And that is especially true when we work collaboratively, when we work in community, when we're doing things together and we're centering our communities and our learners. So many of us are asking ourselves these questions every day, right? Like, how can we ethically and safely gather student information? Because we need to. Or how can we safely communicate with our learners? Because we need to. Or how can we teach our students to use digital tools without compromising their privacy? Because we need to do that too. Or even how can we avoid stoking fear while prioritizing digital safety? You might be tempted to throw your whole computer in the trash. And honestly, from time to time, that's not the worst idea, but we all know that's not realistic in today's world, and it's not what our students need from us. Students need us to help them learn the critical skills they need to succeed in the workforce, with their families, and in American society. And that includes the use of digital tools. So let's talk solutions. I'm going to go over three things that you can try in your program to start to tackle these big questions. And at the end, I'll make several more suggestions, but they'll be less in depth. So first, let's talk about auditing our educational technology. This means asking specific questions that give you a clear picture of a tool's privacy practices. So I'm curious, you can tell me in the chat, currently, how does your program vet educational technology? Are you a part of that process? How do you pick the tech that you use? Doop, 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 doop. All right, I've got the chat open. Or maybe we don't even know. That is what I often find. I'm seeing people look at me and go, mm-mm, I don't know. I don't know how we do that. I'm not aware. I'm not sure. Oh, somebody said we have a technology department. That is awesome. We don't have that enough. So shout out to the people who have technology departments who monitor what sites they can use. Somebody said we use Google Classroom and we use other internal software. I don't make any decisions as a teacher. This is also really common, right? So you can always ask, how did we decide this? Because it's possible your leadership has thought a lot about this already and you just don't know that already, right? Because that information hasn't been shared. It's really great to know that. And depending where you work, you might have a technology department or you might be within like a government office that is vetting that technology and giving different departments and offices and schools permission to use certain things. I know a lot of people who work for public schools, they have totally separate departments who are vetting that for the whole district. Hmm. Great. So I'm hearing a mix of I have no idea, which is how I felt when I was teaching. I had no idea. Or that there are people who do it, but I don't know them. They're doing it without me. Hopefully they're doing a good job. I'm sure that they are. Our agency has an IT department. Yeah. So that's great. It's a good place to start just to know who is checking what and what that procurement looks like because it may be you have people really looking out and you just didn't know. Or it might be that there are some gaps. So let's talk a little bit about ed tech auditing that you can do just for yourself or for your program, depending on your role. You can ask a lot of different questions about education technology tools, whether that's a big learning management system or something small that you're just using for a specific lesson. It really depends on what you want to know. But some examples of what you could ask are, what data does this tool collect? What data does this tool share? How does it secure that data? What rights do I have to that data? Is that data sold? And are there advertisements and tracking in this application or tool? So these are just to get your gears turning. But luckily, there are organizations that are already working on this and they're doing a great job. So we can just go to them for support and do what they advise. The first one is Common Sense Media. Common Sense Media has a whole privacy program where they have evaluations of many ed tech products. They have privacy research and they have a list of evaluation questions and access to privacy risk assessments. It's a really awesome repository where you can check out almost any tool that you might be considering trying out and seeing if it's appropriate for your learners. My one caveat for you all is that they're typically evaluating it for a K-12 context, which is great because that has a lot of strict concerns and focuses on privacy. But if there's something that you're concerned about that's really specific to adults, you might need to open the report and dive a little deeper and make sure that your concern is being addressed. I'll show you really quickly how to look it up. So here's the Common Sense Privacy Program. And I actually just looked one up the other day that did really well. So let's look that one up. Edpuzzle. I was teaching how some teachers how to use Edpuzzle, and I was very, very pleased, if my internet will cooperate with me, to see that Edpuzzle got a really great score. So shout out to Edpuzzle. There was a popular polling app that I previously wanted to start this the session off with like asking you all these questions and then putting up word clouds, and it got a really negative score. So I decided for this topic, I didn't want to share it. But here's a privacy evaluation for Edpuzzle. You can see when it was last updated, you can see they did really well, and you can see all of the different areas that they're scoring it in. Data sharing, it got an 100%. For data collection, it got 83% because it does collect PII. But that's pretty typical of anything where you're going to have to log in and have some kind of name and contact information. So they have all of these pieces of information for you, which is great. But you can also read the report and dive in deeper if you are interested in doing that. But I always come here first because it's just a really great resource for me to know. If I'm going to be talking about something sensitive, which is not always the case, right? You can make a decision about how important being super secure in different activities is for you. The next resource I'll share is the Library Freedom Project. They are a leader when it comes to information democracy. Of course, we love our libraries. Of course, they would be leaders in this. So they have excellent question lists and checklists that they create for library staff to use and evaluate various library vendors. And what I love about using this is that they're thinking about adult library patrons. So they're not thinking about the K-12 context. And so they know that adult library patrons have a variety of privacy concerns, and their questions take a critical approach that really help center the ethics of using these types of technologies. So they have questions for library vendors about privacy, about AI. They have a checklist to audit vendor privacy policies. They have all of these for free on their website, and you can sort through. They have general things all about privacy, policies, and auditing. So many different things that you can use depending on what you want to do. But this is an example, right? And again, it's for a library, so you just have to think about, what makes the most sense for me. But there are some really great questions here that you could determine, which ones are the most relevant to you and what you want to explore and collect. Okay, I'm just making sure that there's also other really great things, like they have little bookmarks on privacy. They have information about different tools. What is a cookie? They even have that one in Spanish. Really, really great stuff. I love the Library Freedom Project. They do really great work. Okay, let's continue here. If you want to dive deeper into EdTech evaluation, you can use Workforce EdTech's tool evaluation criteria. And this goes beyond privacy. This is a world education project that provides a super useful rubric and comparison tool to help your adult foundational education program identify what EdTech tools are actually best suited to help you achieve your goals. At World Education, we talk a lot about goals before tools, not using tech as an add-on or for the sake of tech, but making sure that whatever digital tool you use, it's actually supporting what you already wanted to do, and you're not getting sucked into hype. You're doing it because it makes the most sense for you. All right. I'm going to move us on to my next way you can start to be thinking about digital safety in your program, which is threat modeling. This is a standard cybersecurity practice. Building a threat model means creating a list of the most probable threats to your security and privacy. So every program's threat model is going to be different, and it's based on what you need and what you are thinking about. A traditional threat model, meaning one that's carried out by your IT department or your technology department or a cybersecurity professional, uses these 5 questions. 1, what do I want to protect? 2, who do I want to protect it from? 3, how likely is it that I will need to protect it? 4, how bad are the consequences if I fail? And five, how much trouble am I willing to go through to try to prevent potential consequences? So these questions might be a good fit for you, or you might want to adapt these questions to kind of meet the needs of your program. When I've done in-person and remote trainings for adult education programs on this, I found that a lot of our answers were very similar and it wasn't really getting us exactly where I wanted to go. So I came up with a different way to do this, adapted from these questions, which is to make a chart. So first, I give participants a stack of cards that list different program assets like social media content or student registration forms. And then we use this 2 by 2 grid where on the x-axis, you can see it's the severity of consequences if that data is compromised. And on the y-axis, you can see how easy it is to protect that asset. And we plot the assets on this grid just according to our own experiences and knowledge. And since we are making good time today, we can actually take some time to do that ourselves. So, Lucy, I believe I gave you the link for that. Apologies if I didn't. Um, Here we go. So I made an activity in Flippity that you can use, and it's in the chat right now just because Flippity settings, I kind of like to go to the little gear here and press minus, minus, minus because the words are too big. And you can drag these things around. Note, for those of you who've used Flippity before, it's super secure, which I love, but it also means that if you press X, everything is gone. So you can take some time to kind of drag these around and think, where would this go? Is this easy to protect or is it difficult to protect? Is it a low consequence if this is leaked or compromised somehow? Or is it really, really serious? So I'll give you, what time is it? It's 10:27. I'll give you a moment to play around with that and then we'll talk a little bit more about it. Take 5 minutes. You can take 1 or 2 more minutes. This is just an exercise. You're not locked in to what you do here. Just getting you to start thinking. All right. You may have finished. If you didn't, it's okay. You can keep that link open. Just remember that if you close it, it'll go away. Um, what we do next when I'm in person and we have more time, but we could still do it a little bit today, is we take a look at the grids that we made. I did this very quickly and frankly, a little mindlessly just for the sake of demonstration. But I have folks take a look at this grid. Easy to protect, high consequences if compromised. And I say, let's start there. Can you pick one asset in this quadrant? Easy to protect, high consequences if compromised, and think about one change you can make to your program practices to try and secure that more effectively. So for me, I was thinking about, for example, staff to learner direct messages. Those could be really serious if they were compromised, but they could be easier to protect by using encrypted messages or making program policies around when we put things in writing and when we keep things out of writing and we're talking face to face, right? So that's just one example of a way you could take this activity and start to think about your program practices and make a change. Whoopsie. Okay. And there's a star for the special quadrant where you're thinking and thinking about what you can change in the near future. Let's move on to the third way you can really start thinking about this right now, which is teaching digital safety. Let's make you full screen. Beautiful. This means educating your learners about data rights, privacy, and security. I don't know about you, but I've heard it said that adult education learners are not ready for digital safety materials because it's too difficult for their language skills or too complex for beginning users of technology. And sometimes that could be the case, but I'd like to begin to try to bust that myth by sharing some resources that contain information for many different language proficiency and digital skill levels. That said, if anyone wants to draft a data rights curriculum with me, you should hit my line because I would love to do that. So the first resource I'll share is World Education's Digital Skill Library. This has a wealth of resources related to all sorts of digital skill building needs. And you can visit the privacy and security domain to explore a lot of resources from organizations like Learn Free, North Star Digital Literacy. If you have North Star, I will plug, they just released a cybersecurity basics curriculum. It's not in their online learning modules yet, but it is in their curriculum. So you can use it if you have a North Star account. They also have resources from Common Sense Education, from Digital Learn, which shout out to Digital Learn because they also have resources in Spanish. AARP's Senior Planet, which specifically is targeting mature learners. World Relief, which does a lot of really great teaching for refugees at all language proficiency levels. Lucy is popping some of these resources in the chat for you right now in case you want to take a deeper look at them. They have World Relief has resources for emergent readers all the way through advanced ESOL students, and that includes a lot of things on digital safety. And there's even more in there that you can dig through and explore. It's a really great repository of resources if you want to take a look. And included in that is a favorite of mine, our Digital Skills Glossary. This is an open educational resource which includes a robust section of terms and definitions related to safety and security. So this you can copy and modify to your heart's content. We have a lot of different categories here, but these are all of our vocabulary resources on safety and security that you could use in your classroom, and you can pick the ones that might feel appropriate or not appropriate for your learners. So for each one, they have a definition, its use in a sentence, and an illustration. So adware, antivirus, authentication, balance, cookie, not the yummy kind, cyberbullying, right? And you can pick some of these might not be appropriate for the lesson or the level of your learners. Data breach, ooh, especially relevant right now. A lot of educators are thinking about data breaches at the moment. Um, so I really recommend checking it out. I use it. I used it before I worked at World Ed because it was really useful for me in my job. And now I work here and I get to talk about how great it is. And finally, the Change Agent offers a number of articles about online safety written by and for adult learners. For 10 years, I use the Change Agent religiously in my classroom, and they continue to do outstanding work by uplifting student voices and centering critically important topics. They have multiple editions that are written all about digital tools and safety, so I really recommend checking it out. I've also used that with my learners quite a bit. And shout out, Eric just put in the chat that you guys have a group subscription to the Change Agent, so you can access it for free. Amazing. That is really wonderful. So this is great, but you might be thinking, oh my God, this is not enough. Where do I start? What else can I do? Take a deep breath. That's what I say to myself. Because once you start learning about digital security, you start to go a little insane. Let's talk about it. You should think of privacy as a spectrum. Anything that you can do to move the needle is great. If this is the first time you're learning about digital safety, you don't have to feel pressured to move quickly. You can go slowly. You can pick things that are both important to you and easy to start with. Because every single time you make an adjustment, you are more private and more protected than you were before. So you don't need to throw your computer in the trash. You don't need to explode your phone. You can just start small and start to think about the little ways that you can make adjustments. So, if you or your program is operating at what you would understand as a beginner level, then I would recommend focusing on establishing data hygiene. So, this means focusing on personal accountability and basic system integrity. So, here are some ways that could look: making sure you're compliant with federal laws like FERPA or whatever your grants are requiring of you. Using strong security protocols like strong passwords, two-factor authentication, and ensuring that people are not sharing login credentials for important sites and tools. Maintaining the physical security of technology. So that's like ensuring that devices as well as printed materials that contain confidential information are never left unattended or unlocked. Understanding information privacy. This means being able to distinguish between private information, which is not yours to know, and confidential information, which is not yours to share. And that can also factor in, if the place you want to start is learner communications, thinking about what do I put in writing? What do I not put in writing? Right? And then finally, properly destroying what is not needed. So that's physical copies and electronic copies of certain confidential documents. So my favorite digital hygiene resource is Tactical Tech's Data Detox Kit. This is a toolkit that provides you with everyday steps you can use to take control of your own digital privacy, security, and well-being. So if you don't know where to start, this is a great place to start. I use it all the time, and it's not just for beginners, but it is a really great place to start for beginners. They have things about your smartphone data, and they walk you through all these things that can help you. They have stuff about your settings, locking your digital door, digital well-being. So that's also for your mental, which I need to do because, as you can tell, knowing too much about digital security is not always so good for your mental. So I would really recommend starting with a resource like that. I think it's a really great place to begin and place to learn. I have learned a lot from it myself. But maybe you or your program is operating at an intermediate level, and you can start to engage in data stewardship. So that means managing program assets and student information and interactions responsibly. Here are some ways that can look. You can employ a policy of data minimization. That means reviewing your intake forms, your lesson sign-ins, and more to ensure that you are collecting the minimum data necessary for program reporting. I get this a lot. We want to give our students all these surveys and we want to gather all this information about them so that we can serve them well, but then we don't always use that data and then it's sitting around and it could be compromised. So this is an opportunity to think, do we need that? And if we don't need it, why are we collecting it? You know? The next one is to use best practices for secure messaging. Now, I don't want people to start deleting WhatsApp or something because it was so hard for many of our programs to get these tools set up. And we don't want to siphon off communication channels that we've worked really hard to set up. But there are ways to maximize security settings on WhatsApp, to utilize best practices regarding sharing information. And if you do want, you can switch to more secure messaging apps. At the end of these slides, I have a bunch of learning more links that talk about things like that that Eric can share with you because I've shared this resource with him. Next, you can protect students' identities on social media. When you post information about your program, are you posting students' faces? That might be something we need to leave in the past, depending on what's going on in your community. It might be fine. That might not be a part of your threat model, or you might have some concerns about that these days. Your students may have given you permission to do that at a different time. And now the way that we approach adult ed is a little different. So just think about blurring people's faces out, not including faces, or, really checking with people before you do that, to make sure that they've fully consented to that. Choosing ed tech tools based on vetting. So as we shared earlier, you can audit educational technology tools and select the ones that collect the minimum amount of data necessary or whose privacy policies you feel meet your ethical standards. And then restricting access to sensitive records. I can't tell you how many times I've worked at a program and they've just like given me the keys to the castle. I've been able to see so many things about learners and thought, I don't know if I should be able to access this. So making sure that only the people who need access to certain things, even if they're not malicious actors, it just decreases the amount of opportunities for something to be compromised. Because if I had gotten hacked or something, those people would have had a direct line to student information. But maybe you're advanced and you're ready to engage in community advocacy and a privacy strategy. So that means focusing on systemic protection and empowering your learners. So here are some ways that can look. This can look like integrating technoethics, data rights, and digital citizenship into your instruction. I shared some resources earlier about this, right? About teaching digital safety, but you can even go deeper. You can teach learners how to translate terms and conditions from tech companies into their native languages. You can establish a standard of practice with your learners around what they share on digital tools versus what they share with you in person. You can advise them to use different non-identifiable usernames and emails for language learning apps that won't match their job search applications or official program records in case that data is hacked and then triangulated. So there's a lot of options. Nothing is 100%, but we can start to try and move that needle. The next is establishing a standard of practice around external access to records. So we've heard a lot about this, especially since everything that happened in Minnesota, right? We need to know how to verify credentials and warrants of external agents before allowing them inside our buildings and allowing them access to school data. Another thing can be regularly updating your program's threat model and reviewing text terms of use. This can be part of your continuous improvement plan or yearly updates to your program because things do change. I'm always getting updates from various companies that I have accounts with saying, we've updated our privacy policy. And I'm just like, all right, next. But for your program, it might be something you want to dig into and you get an email like that. And then this is a huge one, proactively sharing with learners how their data is being protected. I know some people say, oh, we don't want to talk about it because we don't want to scare them. But I do believe that talking openly about this and including our learners in the process can build confidence and increase your trust. And we are in an era right now where building that trust is so, so important. And speaking of that trust, I want to uplift this resource from Minnesota. So I actually believe that you have some of these folks coming to speak at this conference, which is great because I've been sharing this with everyone. But staff from Minnesota adult education programs have created resources with advice for how they coped during Operation Metro Surge. And some of these are related to digital security and safety. You can have a chance to listen to them talk about it themselves at 1 p.m. I'm going to try and be there. Hopefully, I can make it. So, this is a little sneak peek of what they'll be telling you about how they handled the increased immigration enforcement and safety concerns. And some of these are related to the digital world. Um, and this is their experience, but I just want to uplift that they have really been in the trenches doing this. And it's really, really generous of them to have taken the time to put all of these learnings together, to share them with the field, and to help us all be safer in the, God forbid event that we need this information as well to support our programs, our learners, our communities at large. So that information is there for you. But of course, as Eric said, they will actually be speaking at the conference at 1 p.m., which is amazing. I'm so happy to know that they're getting opportunities to share what they've learned. So now I would like us to take another minute to reflect on those questions that I shared at the beginning of the session, because you've already started to build your threat model. So I want you to take a minute, and if you want to put it in the chat or you want to share it out loud, you can, but I understand that this is sensitive, right? What you're thinking about might be private. But if you're comfortable, I would love to know, what is one thing you can change now, and what is something you want to learn more about? I will give you a moment to work on that. And once you've completed that, I've left us a little bit of time for Q&A where we'll end the recording. But I'll give you a minute for this. Hmm. I like that somebody said right now they can go through the common sense privacy evaluation and check the technology that they're using. That's great. And depending on where you work, I'd be curious if there's a department that's already done that, or done their own version of that. That's awesome. Yeah, that's an amazing resource from Common Sense. Very grateful. If there is something in there that, like, you can't find a certain tool in there, they've put out some research on um, uploading privacy policies into like AI chatbots and having it search huge amounts of data to find certain keywords and then help you identify things that you're concerned about. Yeah, use common sense. I can add more digital literacy to my curriculum. Yay! Love that. Hmm. I got a private message with another really great point that I will just uplift. Thinking about when we collect identifiable information like social security numbers is something we really need to think about. Some programs I know you don't have a choice because it's required. But if you don't have to, um, yes, learning about alternatives to WhatsApp. Again, if you feel that that is like a worthwhile change for you, right? Or whether you can change the way that you use a tool like WhatsApp to increase security, and that would be an easier shift for your program. Teaching students the ins and outs of digital safety, and then they can see things from a new perspective. Wonderful. Asking for help when unsure. That's my favorite one. Yes, we are not in this alone. We can work on it together and figure it out together. We are stronger together than we are apart when it comes to things like this. And we all know there's no silver bullet. I wish that there were, but there is not. Um, so we can just do our best to decrease our risk. All right. Thank you so much. And I will stick around for about 10 minutes. I just want to highlight that I have a lot of resources in these slides that you can click through yourself if you want them from Eric, as well as all my works cited. And you can review all of the information in there. And you can also email me because I want to know what you're thinking about.